The sky cracked with a streak of lightning, just as Eleanor Clark pressed a blood-soaked cloth against her husband's chest. Rain drummed the tin roof of the clinic, echoing louder than the gunshots outside. James was gasping, each breath more desperate than the last. His once steady surgeon's hands trembled as he gripped hers. She held on harder. "I need more gauze," she whispered, though she knew it wouldn't matter. The bullet had torn through too much. His lips moved, but no sound came. A soft gurgle in his throat. His eyes, blue like the high summer sky, met hers for the last time. Then gone. Ellie didn't scream. Not when he went still. Not when the clinic door shattered off its hinges. She grabbed her scalpel and turned, only to find the man who burst in wasn't aiming at her. He was bleeding too. A settler. Face slashed, pants soaked red. He looked around, then muttered, "Doc's dead?" She didn't answer. "Damn shame," he said, then stumbled toward the shelves and started grabbing medicine. "We're gonna need all this. Town's burnin'. You best hide." She stood rooted as more men barged in, some dragging the wounded, others dragging loot. Within minutes, her clinic, her sanctuary, became a butcher's market. Bottles shattered. Her notes scattered like wind-blown leaves. Her husband lay dead on the floor, his body kicked aside as another settler collapsed where he'd been. No one asked her if she was all right. No one even looked at her face. By the next morning, the outlaws were gone, vanished like ghosts, taking livestock, tools, and 3 young women with them. The settlement blamed the Cheyenne. Of course they did. Never mind that not a single feather, moccasin print, or horse track was found. The lies came easy. A war always needed someone to hang it on. And Ellie, the widow nurse with the strange silence, became a target too. They held a rushed funeral for James, but no one offered to dig the grave. The preacher coughed out a single psalm, then turned and walked away before her tears even reached the soil. They didn't say it aloud, but she saw it in their eyes. She was cursed. A wife who couldn't save her man. A nurse who couldn't stop the blood. A woman who lived when others didn't. The whispers started soon after. Always kept to herself, that one. "She's not right. Not since her boy died. Maybe she called this bad luck on us." By week's end, someone broke the windows of her clinic. Then someone stole her horse. The last straw came when the sheriff dropped by, not to offer help, but to say, "You be wise to pack up, Miss Clark. Folks are uneasy." She packed what little she had left. A travel bag, her journals, James' spectacles, a rusted rifle that barely fired. She walked through town in her black dress, head high, though her boots were cracked and her soul frayed thin. She didn't cry, not even when she passed the small white fence where they had once planned to grow roses. She made it to the edge of the woods before the snow began to fall. The wind howled like a wounded thing. Trees groaned under the weight of early frost. Ellie trudged forward, numb hands gripping her coat tight. She didn't know where she was going. Just away. Away from a town that had buried her alive with her husband. By nightfall, she reached the ridge overlooking the valley, where the plains swept wide, and only the river whispered. Her old cabin stood at the edge of the trees, long abandoned after James had taken her to town. She opened the door to find it still half full of dust, old chairs, cobwebs, and a family of squirrels. It was home enough. She lit a fire, set the kettle to boil, laid her husband's coat across the bed, and folded it like a body. Then she sat in the corner and stared. Hours passed. The fire burned low. The tea went cold. She didn't sleep. It was near midnight when she heard it, the dragging crunch of something moving through snow. A shape slumped just beyond the tree-line. Tall, broad-shouldered, staggering. Her breath caught. She reached for the rusted rifle and stepped outside. The wind nearly stole her breath. Moonlight flickered through branches. And there, in the clearing, he stood. A man, bare-chested, barefoot, blood soaking the side of his torso. A single long braid draped across his shoulder. Face painted in smeared red ochre. Eyes sharp but fading. He took 2 more steps forward, then collapsed into the snow. Ellie rushed to him before her brain caught up with her body. "Sir," she asked, kneeling, "can you hear me?" His lips moved. She leaned closer. Not die here. His skin was burning. Fever. The wound was deep, something slashed across his ribs, but there were older bruises too. Chains had cut into his wrists. Rope burns around his ankles. She should have hesitated. Should have feared him. But instead, she said, "You picked a bad night to die, stranger." It took everything to get him inside. He was heavy, but not dead weight. He fought her grip, groaned, tried to crawl. She gritted her teeth. "Stop moving, or I'll leave you to freeze." He didn't understand English, or didn't care. By the time she had him by the fire, his eyes had rolled back. Ellie worked without pause. Boiled water. Cleaned his wounds. Used what little bandages she had. She crushed herbs with trembling fingers, whispering what few words of Comanche she remembered from her years helping tribal children. When he finally stirred hours later, he looked at her with a wary confusion, like a wolf trapped in a storm. His eyes were a strange, golden-brown color, feral and alive. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said quietly. He pointed at her coat. "Doctor." "Nurse." He nodded barely. "My name's Eleanor Clark," she added. He struggled to speak, then rasped, "Tasani." His voice was deep, hoarse with pain. She handed him water. He took it like a man who'd forgotten what mercy tasted like. That night, while he slept, she sat beside him with her rifle and journal. She wrote, "He's Comanche, but he didn't come to kill. His wounds weren't from battle. They were from running, from being hunted. Maybe like me." She paused, then added, "I don't believe in fate, but something brought him here, and something in me won't let him die." By dawn, he was breathing steady. The snow had stopped, and in the quiet, as she watched the fire flicker over his face, Ellie realized something terrifying. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone, and that, more than anything, frightened her most. Because she knew what loneliness did to the heart, but she didn't yet know what hope could do to it. And someone somewhere was already looking for the man lying under her roof. Someone who wouldn't care that she'd once been a healer, or a widow, only that now she was protecting the enemy. The next morning brought wind and silence. Eleanor stirred the fire back to life with the tip of a rusted poker. Tasani still slept, his breath shallow but even. His bare chest was covered in herbs, bandages, and the scent of smoke and sweat. Outside, the snow had hardened to a crust over the earth, crunching under boot or hoof, though none yet came near. She moved quietly through the cabin, stacking firewood, checking the dried meat supply, and boiling water. Every so often, she glanced toward him. He wasn't just a man, not just a patient. He was a storm waiting to return. She'd seen many wounded in her time. Settlers, trappers, children mauled by wolves, miners crushed in cave-ins. But Tasani, his body bore the kind of marks left by something crueler than chance. His wounds told stories of escape, of chains, of lashes and fire. The kind of suffering no lawman would speak of, because the law was often holding the whip. By midday he stirred. His eyes blinked against the light. His hand instinctively went to his side, then to his throat. "Water," she said softly, bringing a tin cup. He drank slowly, wincing. "You bled enough to kill 3 men," she said, sitting across from him. His gaze flicked to her face. "Still here. I could have left you. You didn't." They studied each other in the firelight. 2 ghosts wearing skin. Both haunted. Both still breathing. He tried to sit up. She pushed him back. "You've got cracked ribs and a fever. Move too fast and you'll tear the stitches. And if you bleed again, I've got nothing left to patch you with. I must leave. You'll die. I can't stay." "Then we're at an impasse," she said, voice sharper than she meant it to be. "Because I dragged you here, stitched you up, shared the last of my broth. So you'll rest, whether you like it or not." A silence passed. He looked toward the door. Then he said, "They'll come." "Who?" "The ones who chained me." Ellie folded her arms. "Why were they chasing you?" He didn't answer. She didn't press. Instead, she opened her journal, scribbled something down. When she caught him looking, she turned the page slightly. "You write lies?" he asked. "I write truth," she said, "even when it hurts." "I don't know that word." "Truth." She closed the book. "Most don't." Over the next 2 days, he healed slowly, ate sparingly, spoke little. He watched everything, every corner of the room, every creak of the cabin logs, every movement of her hands. And Ellie, she couldn't decide if she felt safer or more exposed. One night, as she stoked the fire, he finally asked, "Your man, the one whose coat you keep folded." She paused. "He was a doctor." "You loved him." "Yes." "What happened?" "Outlaws came. He stayed to help the wounded." She hesitated. "I couldn't save him." Tisani looked into the flames. "They say nurses carry the soul of two people, their own and those they couldn't save." "I carried too many," she replied. After that, something softened between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. The next morning, she taught him how to hold the rifle properly. "You'll tear your shoulder out if you fire like that," she said, adjusting his grip. He gave her a sideways look. "You shoot." "I shoot if I have to." He smirked. "You do it wrong." "I do everything wrong, apparently." He grinned, just a flicker, but it stayed. That night, they cooked rabbit over the fire. She added dried berries and pine needles for tea. The cabin smelled like something close to a home. "You always live alone?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Not until recently." He looked around. "You keep things clean." "You've never met a nurse before." "I met one once," he said. "She slapped me with a spoon." Ellie laughed. He looked startled at the sound. "I'm sorry," she said, catching her breath. "It's just, I forgot what laughing felt like." Tisani looked at her a long moment, then laughed more. They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them, their shared pasts echoing in unspoken words. But peace is always short-lived in places like this. On the 5th day, horse tracks appeared near the stream. Ellie spotted them while fetching water. Deep, fresh, with a boot print beside them. Not Comanche. Settler. She returned to the cabin without a word. But her hands trembled as she loaded the rifle. "They're close," she told him. He didn't argue. That night, neither slept. At dawn, they heard it, the whistle. Low. Repeating. 3 short, 1 long. Tisani's head turned sharply. "Signal." "You sure?" "I've used it myself." Ellie didn't ask what that meant. They packed. Quietly. Efficiently. She gathered her journal, her husband's coat, and a pouch of dried herbs. He slung on his satchel, tightened the bandage on his side, and checked the sharpness of his knife. When they stepped out into the early light, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then came the shout. There, by the ridge, 2 riders burst from the trees, both armed, both moving fast. Tisani grabbed Ellie's wrist. "Run." They fled up the slope, boots skidding on frost and pine needles. Shots cracked through the air. Bark exploded near her head. A bullet tore her shawl. They ducked behind a boulder. "Give him up, widow," came the voice, coarse, familiar. Ellie's breath caught. Sheriff Miller. Of course it was him. She peeked out. "What do you want?" "You know what? That savage killed 3 of my boys." "No, he didn't." "You calling me a liar?" "I'm saying you were the noose in this story, Sheriff." Gunfire answered her. Tisani pulled her down. "Too many," he muttered. "Too fast." "What do we do?" He looked at her. "You trust me?" She hesitated, then nodded. He handed her the rifle. "Cover me. 1 minute." "Where are you going?" "To finish it." Before she could argue, he darted through the trees, silent as a shadow. She aimed the rifle, waited, counted. 30 seconds in, she heard shouting. Then a scream. Then silence. The other rider spun in panic, trying to flee, but a hatchet flew from the woods and caught him in the leg. He collapsed screaming. Tisani stepped out, blood on his hands, but his eyes were steady. Ellie emerged, still aiming. Miller lay at the base of the ridge, a broken neck, dead eyes staring into the sky. "You said you wouldn't survive if you stayed," she said breathlessly. "I didn't." They burned the bodies by the riverbank. No prayers, just smoke and silence. That night, back in the cabin, Ellie cleaned his wounds again. This time, she didn't flinch at the blood. She worked with steady hands. "You should leave," she said after a while. "They'll come again, with more men." "I will. Tomorrow." He didn't reply. She looked up. What? I will leave when you come with me. Ellie froze. Tisani met her gaze. You're not safe here. And I owe you more than breath. You don't owe me anything. I do. My people say the one who saves you sees your spirit. You saw mine, and still stayed. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because deep down, she knew she had no more roots here. Nothing but ash. And somewhere far from this cursed edge of nowhere, maybe there was something left to grow. She closed her journal that night with a final line. He came to me broken, but in his survival, I found the pieces of myself I didn't know were still alive. She blew out the candle, heart racing and quiet. Tomorrow, the world would change again. They traveled north through the pines and cold fog. Ellie had left her old life with nothing but a saddlebag of stitched journals, dried herbs, and her late husband's coat tied to the back of Tisani's horse. She rode behind him in silence the first day, her arms wrapped tight around his waist, not for affection, but balance. And warmth. And maybe something more she hadn't yet admitted. They didn't speak much on the trail, but silence between them had changed. It was no longer the kind that swelled from grief. It was a quiet carved out by necessity, by danger, and something fragile that hadn't yet asked to be named. They passed the ruins of a burned homestead on the second night. Smoke still curled from its remains. Tisani dismounted first, scouted the perimeter, then returned with his jaw clenched tight. It was fresh, he said. One day, maybe less. Settlers, she asked. Not by choice. Ellie felt her stomach twist. They rode harder after that. No fires. No voices. Only the hiss of wind through the pines and the distant howl of coyotes. By the fourth day, they came upon a ridge overlooking a dry basin and a narrow pass. Tisani pointed. Beyond that is my people's winter path. The safest place to disappear. Ellie squinted. That's the one place they'll try to cut off. They'll try. She wasn't sure what gave her more comfort, his confidence or the knife he now kept tied across his chest. As they descended into the basin, the wind changed. With it came the metallic scent of iron and something worse, something sour. Blood, he said before she could ask. They approached a ravine cut deep into the rock. At the base, 2 horses lay dead, arrows sticking from their flanks. Next to them were 2 men, bound, gagged, and executed. One wore a sheriff's badge. The other had a tattoo of the Cross Pistols gang. Ellie turned her head. What is this? Message, Tisani murmured. But not for us. Then for who? He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt beside the corpses and pulled a strip of parchment from the gang member's vest. On it were 4 names. Hers was third. Ellie. Clark. Widow nurse. Someone paid to make me vanish, she said quietly. No, he said. They paid to make you a warning. Her skin went cold. Then we stopped running. We stop, he agreed, but not without a plan. They made camp inside a hollowed-out cave, shielded by twisted cedar and brush. Tisani crafted traps along the slope, sharpened sticks tied with vine tripwires, bone whistles to signal movement. Ellie gathered herbs, laid them in circles around the fire, and crushed bark for poultices. I used to think I belonged to the land, she said as she mixed ash and willow bark. But the land doesn't remember names. It remembers bones, blood. It remembers kindness too, he replied, watching her fingers. She looked at him. You say that like you believe it. I say it because you stayed. They shared hard bread that night, watered wine, the sort of meal that came before storms. And they both knew it. As the moon rose, Tisani handed her a carved pendant, a sunburst wrapped in cedar twine. My sister made this, he said, before she was taken. Ellie traced the edges. She's the one you were hunting when they caught you. He nodded once. I'm sorry, she whispered. She was strong. Like you. Silence stretched. The fire crackled. I'm not strong, Ellie said. I just got tired of dying slowly. You still fear. I fear going back. Seeing what they turned my clinic into. Seeing the face of that town. The people who watched me fall and looked away. Then you should return, he said simply. She blinked. You want me to go back? Yes. That's how you end it. She laughed, dry and bitter. You don't know them. They'd hang me before hearing me. Then don't go to be heard. Go to be seen. Let them choke on their shame. She stared at him. You'd ride with me? He met her gaze without blinking. I already do. The ride back to the settlement took a day and a half. The land had changed in their absence. The river ran lower. The trees seemed thinner. Burn scars marked the trail. Even the crows flew lower, as if they sensed something rotten beneath the earth. They arrived at dusk. The town looked smaller now, broken. Half the buildings were boarded up. The sheriff's office bore black soot across its side, and the church bell hung sideways, smashed from its post. They stopped just before the clearing. You still want this? Tasani asked. Ellie stared at the dirt road that had once led to her home. She nodded. I do. He reached over and handed her the pendant again. This time, she didn't refuse. They rode in slowly, like ghosts reclaiming their graves. No one greeted them. No guns yet. Just wary eyes from windows. Whispers behind cracked shutters. Ellie dismounted first. Then a voice barked, rough, choked with surprise. You got nerve, woman. Outstepped a man she hadn't seen in months. Amos Greaves, former deacon. Now missing an eye, and from the looks of it, half his soul. You come crawling back with that savage after what happened, he spat. I come back with the truth, Ellie said, steady. And I won't crawl for any of you. Others gathered. Men, women. Some with hammers, others with children clinging to skirts. What truth? Someone called out. That your law was bought. That Sheriff Miller sold your safety to outlaws for gold. That the blood on your barns, your wives, your children, it wasn't his to sell. But he did it anyway. And when you needed someone to blame, you looked at me. Prove it, Amos hissed. Tasani stepped forward, held up the parchment. The names. The bounty mark at the bottom signed in Miller's crooked hand. Your sheriff ordered her dead, Tasani said. And many more. A hush swept through the street. Then Ellie stepped forward, pulling back the collar of her coat to reveal the knife wound that still hadn't healed properly. I was willing to die trying to save you people, and not one of you gave me a grave to stand on. You think I came back for mercy? No, I came back so you'd never forget what you turned away from. A little girl stepped forward. Ellie recognized her, Lena, daughter of the baker. Ellie had once nursed her through the measles. The girl handed her a daisy. My mama says you made me better, she said. Ellie knelt, took the flower with shaking fingers. Amos scoffed. Don't be fooled. This is all theater. But no one moved. No one backed him. Because the fire in Ellie's voice wasn't theater. It was something older, truer. Finally, someone asked, what now? Ellie straightened. You can fix what you've broken. Or you can keep rotting. But I won't be here to watch. I came to make sure the truth landed. What you do with it is up to you. Then she turned her back on them. Tasani followed without a word. They left the town in silence. But something had changed behind them. For the first time, no one threw stones. No one cursed. And when they rode into the twilight beyond the hill, Ellie didn't look back. She didn't have to, because she finally knew who she was without needing anyone else to name her. They followed the river until the land turned green again. Spring had crept back into the world like a secret, whispering life into branches and thawing the edge of every stream they crossed. Wildflowers pushed through the soil like they'd never known death, and the birds, bold and unworried, sang like there'd never been silence. Ellie rode beside Tasani now, not behind. She no longer gripped him for balance. She rode straight, firm, her rifle strapped to the saddle, and a blade hidden beneath her coat. The widow nurse was gone. What remained was something tougher, quieter, and unafraid of the echo of her own steps. The plan was simple. Return to the canyon. Find the men who had taken his sister. The same outlaws who torched the settlement, framed the innocent, and traded lives for coin. The same men whose reach had nearly stolen everything Ellie had left. They were mercenaries now, half bandit, half paid gun, holding a hidden camp between two ridges where no lawman dared step. Even Tasani had hesitated when he described the location. "We'll be outnumbered," he'd warned. Ellie's reply had been simple. "Good." They scouted the ridge on foot 3 days later. The camp sprawled across a canyon shelf, half tents and half ruined wagons, with smoke drifting up from a blackened cookpit. There were 7 men, maybe more, all armed, mean-looking, loud, the kind that mistook cruelty for strength. Ellie studied them through the brush, her hands tight around her journal. She no longer wrote in it. Not now. Now, she read from it. A name on the last page. Her husband's. Her son's. And below that a blank line. "Leave it," Tasani had told her once. "Don't write more until you survive it." Tonight they would try. They waited until dark, then moved like breath through the canyon. The plan unfolded in silence. Tasani cut the watchmen's throats without a sound. Ellie slipped into the far tent, where 2 of the captives were tied, young, beaten, but alive. She pressed a finger to her lips and freed them with practiced hands. A dog barked. The camp stirred. And then, like striking a match, it all ignited. Tasani's war cry cracked through the canyon like thunder. Ellie took her position behind the supply crates, firing clean, practice shots. She didn't flinch. Not when one of the men charged her with a blade. Not when blood hit her cheek. They fought like people with nothing left to lose. Like ghosts come back to demand reckoning. Tasani moved through the firelight like a myth, blade flashing, eyes alight with fury. Ellie covered his back, reloading between heartbeats, heart hammering but steady. When the smoke began to clear, 5 men lay dead. 2 others crawled away, wounded and screaming. But one remained, the leader. He stood near the edge of the cliff, a woman held by the hair, pistol pressed to her head. She was bruised, eyes swollen, but alive. Tasani froze. "Sister," he said. The outlaw sneered. "You want her? Drop the knife." Tasani stepped forward slowly, dropped it. The man grinned, too wide, too confident. "Stupid," he muttered. "You people never learn." Then his gun arm jerked. But Ellie had already moved. One shot cracked the night. The outlaw's hand burst in red. Another shot. His knee gave out. A third his chest. And he fell, mouth wide in stunned silence, tumbling backward off the cliff into darkness. Ellie stood just yards away, barrel smoking. "I learn," she said. Tasani ran to his sister, catching her before she could fall. They held each other in stunned, shaking silence. Ellie didn't interrupt. She just knelt, picked up her journal, and for the first time in weeks, wrote a name on the next line. Tasani. Alive. They buried the dead without ceremony. No prayers. Just fire and stone. They didn't look back. The ride away from the canyon felt lighter, like the land no longer pulled at them with claws. His sister rode ahead with the others, silent but free. And Ellie rode beside Tasani once more, the wind brushing strands of her hair across her face, her fingers still smelling faintly of gunpowder. "You saved her," he said. "No," Ellie replied. "You did." He looked at her for a long time. "You've changed." "So have you." He reached into his satchel, pulled out something small, cedar twine and silver. "I carved a new one," he said, placing it in her hand. "For you." She turned it over in her palm. A heart, shaped not like a symbol, but an arrowhead. "It means this," he said, "to give without chains." She swallowed hard. They rode on, silence between them again, but this time it held something warmer. No longer grief, no longer fear, just understanding. Days later, when they reached the edge of the valley, where the land folded into soft hills, Ellie stopped to look back. Behind her, smoke curling faint from distant fires. The bones of old stories buried in dust. Ahead, new earth, open sky. Tasani waited for her. And this time, she didn't need to be asked. She rode forward. Narrator's voice, quiet and full. Some women are left to burn, to break, to wither quietly where no one sees. But some find a fire inside that won't go out, even when the world does its worst to snuff it. I was a nurse once, a wife, a widow, and now I'm something else entirely. Not because he gave me his heart, but because he reminded me I still had one. She lifts her eyes to the sun. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.